All right, so welcome back to In the Studio with Kevin Savage. On this portion of the podcast, we are going to talk about some music news. Now, last week we talked about Mac Miller and the individual who gave him sold him the fake, the individual sold him oxycodone that was counterfeit and actually had a bunch of fentanyl in it, has been caught. We also briefly talked about R. Kelly being indicted, basically finally going to trial. I made the rookie mistake of mixing Ride With Me, which is not R. Kelly. It's actually Nelly with R. Kelly. And I was definitely embarrassed about that for about a moment. It's not Ride With Me. That was not R. Kelly. That's Nelly. R. Kelly is, remixed to Ignition and other stuff. Anyway, and then we talked about Post Malone's new album, which I did listen to. Maybe at some point I'll discuss it a little bit. Spoiler alert, I thought it was all right, but not amazing. I was a little disappointed. I like some of his other stuff, but this album, I don't know, there's just some music in there that I was like, it just didn't resonate with me. Now, today we are only going to have one more juicy piece of music news, and then we're going to talk a little bit about some music technology and some news regarding music, a particular artist kind of moving up in the Billboard Hot 100. So the first story that I want to talk about is about a particular individual who is unique, to say the least. I am not a fan of his music. I just don't like the way that his voice sounds. I think his beats are good. I think he is really good at choosing the beats that he picks for his music, but I don't like the way he raps, raps. Like, I just don't like... I don't like his sound. It's kind of annoying to me. Now, we're not going to be talking about his music, at least on this episode. Maybe I'll sit down and actually listen to his music and try to think a little more than just kind of the snippets that I've listened to. And that individual, who's related to this story, is the infamous Tekashi 6ix9ine, the individual that a lot of people love to hate. His manager, or former manager, so it says in this Pitchfork article, Kifano Shotti Jordan, was sentenced to 15 years in prison on 2 federal weapons counts. And, so basically there was a situation in which Jordan was involved with. The incident basically Jordan 6ix9ine and some other associates decided to rob a rival gang member and rapper. Jordan was brandishing a pistol. That was the first incident, and the second incident took place later on that same month, in which an individual approached Jordan and Hernandez and other associates at a restaurant, I think, and there was some comments being thrown around, and Jordan and 6ix9ine and others got into the car and drove away. The individual and the other person followed them. Then Jordan got out of the vehicle and fired 2 shots in that person's car. Now, Jordan was originally arrested in November 2018, the same time as 6ix9ine, and he was originally charged with 6 counts, including racketeering, conspiracy, violent crimes in aid of racketeering, and firearms use, but because of a plea deal in March of this year. Jordan pleaded just to firearm possession and firearm discharge counts. A month prior to this pleading guilty, 6ix9ine pleaded guilty to racketeering, conspiracy, multiple firearm offenses, narcotics, trafficking, and other charges. It's a lot. It's a lot. It's a whole lot. I don't know. I'm never going to get it. I wasn't raised in an environment in which this was kind of just part of my life. I know that based on what I've read and what I've heard of for 6ix9ine, his life has not been easy. That's not to give him any sort of pass on this, but it's kind of these cycles that some of these people get involved with. And as I've said with some of my earlier statements in the last podcast, it's sad. It's really sad because, as much as I don't like Tekashi 6ix9ine's rap sound, I do think he could be successful. I mean, he is successful, but he could be more than what he is. But, these individuals, for whatever reason, get involved in things. They let their personalities and tempers and attitudes explode. And listen, I've definitely had my moments where I've been in situations that I've just it's been hard to control my own temper. And I'm a really patient person. So I can only imagine if you're already someone who's got a short fuse, things just rapidly getting out of control, and just at the next thing you find yourself in a courtroom with firearm related charges. So we're going to be following this story just like the Mac Miller story, just like the R. Kelly story. I'm going to do my best to learn a bit more, but a lot of these little stories that I find on Pitchfork, I just like bringing them up to you and just saying my first thoughts. So that is Tekashi 6ix9ine and Shotti Jordan. And now we're going to move on to some music technology news. Something that I think is kind of interesting. So being someone who's involved in podcasting now, and having been involved in music production and release, and really trying to do my best to follow, this kind of who's going to have control of the lion's share of the streams. It ultimately, it's really Apple Music and Spotify. If you look at any graphs, those two own the lion's share. Now, granted, Spotify outnumbers Apple pretty significantly. I think it was ARK Investment Management released a pie chart that in 2017 Spotify pretty much owned 49% of the streams in the market share streams, but honestly, especially with this thing that just released a week ago or so, this article says September 5th. It sounds about right. Maybe it was a little, honestly, I think it felt a little more before that, but I could be wrong. Either way, Apple Music is trying to obviously assert themselves and really kind of trying to close in on Spotify. And so what do? They released a beta version of Apple Music that you can now access in a web browser. So if you go to, I think it's beta.music.apple.com, you can actually now, if you already subscribe to Apple Music and you pay that money per month, you can now listen to all the music you saved, all the playlists you've created, and stuff like that, including Beats One Radio, and I think pretty much all the other playlists that are out there on the web. You don't have to be on a computer with Apple Music that's already downloaded and installed. You don't have to sign someone else out of their own computer so that you can sign in to access your music. Now you can just go on, I believe it's any web browser, and just sign in. And I think this is really good, especially for people who operate on platforms that maybe the Apple Music platform doesn't exist, or, especially like I think if you're like a Linux user or something like that. being able to have access to this is Apple trying to take over a piece of that share. And before I worked on this, read a bit about this. This happening, I went online to find like the Spotify, to sign into the Spotify web browser, and there's not a whole lot, to be honest. I do think in this case Apple Music is doing a better job with the web browser. I do think Spotify has sometimes some better music, especially in more of the underground sounds or more new artists. I know a lot of new artists are really focused on Spotify because more people use it, or are more invested in it. And there's a lot of great playlists that if you get put on, you get a ton of streams. That said, Apple Music pays better than Spotify. So it's really kind of like where, I'm going to be really interested to see where things go. So that's some interesting news that just recently dropped. If you are a Apple Music subscriber, check it out. I'm sure. So I'm recording this the day before Apple is announcing this major, basically what's going to come. Historically, there's usually a new phone released around this time. So, Apple's making a lot of huge news. I live in New York. The Fifth Avenue store is about to be unveiled. Like all these huge news, huge moves that are being made are all kind of popping. And so I'm really interested to know kind of where all this goes. And, maybe there's going to be some interesting music related news at this announcement on the 10th. That's tomorrow. I'm recording this around 8 p.m. on Monday. And so we'll see. Maybe I'll have something to bring to you guys next week with regard to something new Apple's going to do. All right. Now, moving on to the last story. So recently we had the MTV Music Awards. It triggered all of the Fox conservatives with Taylor Swift's advocacy of the Equal Rights Act through her music and the statements that were made. There was a lot of representation, a lot of, push for equal rights and, or the Equal Rights Act and stuff like that. And, out of all of this, other than a bunch of triggered Fox readers and viewers, Lizzo and her song that actually came out in 2017, Truth Hurts, following the MTV Music Awards, snatched from Camila Cabello's Señorita the Billboard Hot 100's #1 spot. Now Señorita or Camila, I'm gonna butcher this name. I'm so bad with names. I'm sorry, all you guys. Snatched the #1 from Billie Eilish, who held it, I think, for like a week, who took it from Lil Nas X, who held it for 19 weeks, setting a record for longest running hot song on Hot 100. I think it was like he held it as a solo artist for 1 week, and then with his, and I'm drawing a blank on the name of the individual, Billy Ray Cyrus, who held it. They together then held it for the following 18 weeks. Just an insanely long time, and honestly, kudos to you. Kudos to Lil Nas for doing that. Anyway, she took it. Right before recording this podcast, just, I listened to it. I hadn't really heard it, and it's a bop. It's not honestly my favorite song in the world, but I do think it sounds good. It's a bop. It's fun, and it's kind of lighthearted a little bit, but it's still sassy, and it's fun. I don't think it's nearly as creative as some of Billie Eilish's music or Lil Nas X's music when it comes to like what they were doing and what they've been doing. Lizzo's song feels kind of like it's something I've heard before. So, I don't know if it was because of her song that it it hit the top 100, or just everything surrounding those MTV Music Awards just kind of helped propel it. Maybe it's a mix of both, but I don't want to try to cut her down, because I think it is a good song. It's just not, I don't find it to be as unique as the Lil Nas X song or the Billie Eilish song. Both of those kind of have some interesting moves that are being made with the crossover and kind of just how Billie approaches this song construction, whereas I think the Lizzo song is a little root. It's a little typical, I suppose, but it's still a good song. At the bottom line, it's still a good song. That's awesome. I think it's her first Hot 100 placement, which is awesome. She's not your typical pop star. She doesn't have your typical pop star look by kind of the standards that exist today. I think that's awesome. I'm always here for representation and stuff like that in the music industry, so I think it's pretty awesome. So I applaud you, Lizzo. Congratulations on your spot. Now we're gonna be right back. So stay tuned. We're gonna talk a little more. We're gonna return. We're going to return to what we were talking about earlier, top 5 plugin recommendations in the final thoughts segment of this podcast. So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.